We now come to the great wonder of divine union. Such a mystical merger with the Absolute is called in Hinduism samadhi. In the Christian mysticism of saints, such as Teresa of Avila or Catherine of Siena, this state of divine union is referred to as the mystical marriage. In alchemy, it is the ultimate transmutation and is known as coniunctio, or the holy conjunction of opposites. This great gift was granted to me one stormy day many years ago, unexpectedly, inexplicably, leaving a sense of overwhelming wonder, awe, and ecstasy beyond the power of words to describe. For it is a blessing only to be found in the divine pleroma, which is to say, the fullness and transcendent breadth of the cosmic all. Early on in my new spiritual journey, I came upon the practice of Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga is one of the disciplines of Hinduism, which at this moment in the West is a popular form of exercise and is usually practiced for its positive physical benefits, which are many. But the deeper significance of Hatha Yoga lies in its worth as a spiritual practice, to be used as a tool for the transformation of consciousness and achieving elevated mystical states. For the poses and stretching in Hatha Yoga ultimately serve to stimulate and focus the flow of prana, which is that subtle spiritual energy which streams invisibly through our bodies and underlies all things. Yoga is a word which is derived from a Sanskrit root meaning yoke, or to join or attach. In this sense, yoga provides a means by which one may join one's own consciousness to the divine. There are various forms of yoga, from Bhakti Yoga to Mantra Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Raja Yoga. Each form uses a different means, be it through devotion, knowledge, energization, or sound manipulation, to serve the same mystical end. Ironically, I first came across Hatha Yoga on a public television series called Lilius Yoga and You. At this point, I knew nothing of the other forms of yoga and simply followed the prescribed exercises and postures called the asanas. Along the way, I had learned about the subtle power centers called the chakras, which lay along the spine. These 6 chakras are concentrated receptacles of pranic energy, and each chakra is associated with a particular archetypal idea. But at this time, I was quite unaware of the more advanced principles or practices of Kundalini and Raja Yoga. That would only come later, after reading the works of Patanjali, Swami Vivekananda, and Arthur Avedon. The underlying belief system in Kundalini Yoga revolves around the figure of the goddess Shakti, who is the divine consort of the god Shiva, the third deity in the Hindu Trinity. It is the Tantric Yoga belief that when the human comes to birth, during the formation of the fetus, the divine energy, in the form of Kundali Shakti, the she-serpent, descends from the top of the head, down through the spine, coming to rest at the base of the spine in the chakra known as Muladhara. It is this fundamental Kundalini energy, this our undying soul essence, that must be awakened and must rise through the chakras in order for one to achieve mystical rebirth. However, at that point in my life, since I was unaware of all the deeper implications of my yoga practice, I knew little of these potentialities. I was simply working with the asanas and chakras in order to gain some vague spiritual gain or inner understanding. One summer afternoon, at the age of 24, after going through my daily yoga session, I had an experience that would transform my perception of this world and change my understanding of the vast worlds which lie within. As usual, I first went through the various yoga stretches and inverted postures doing headstands, the downward dog, the plow. It is these inverted postures which help reverse the normal flow of prana from up to down, as occurs with the lower bodily digestive functions, thus redirecting one's energies from down to up toward those spiritual qualities of etherealization and ascent. The culmination of my yoga session was always to totally relax and to still all that went before. Thus I lay flat on my back and relaxed into the corpse pose, known as savasana. In this final stage of my yoga session, I would always begin by focusing all my attention upon the lowest chakra, Muladhara, which lay at the base of the spine. With eyes closed, I continued to focus on the single point at the center of the chakra. As my body began to slightly quiver, as the shaking increased, eventually the chakra would activate, and my vision became filled with a flood of pulsating light. With the first chakra activated, I moved on to the second chakra and repeated the process. I now recognize that during this process, I was actuating a wedding of the Dionysian and Apollonian principles. For I was engaging in a willful directing of the fiery Kundalini force, while simultaneously resigning myself to pure receptivity and a cessation of physical activity. As I progressed up through the chakras, with each ascent, the bodily shaking increased, as mental focus became harder to maintain. Little did I know at the time that it's because of such a powerful pranic physical reaction that Indian yogins position themselves in what is called lotus position, with one of their feet locked into the base of their spine in order to control the shaking. But since I did not know this fact, I simply flopped around uncontrollably on the floor. When I reached the sixth chakra, ajna, also identified as that invisible third eye, which lies between our two seeing eyes, the shaking became extreme. Yet with will and determination, I kept my attention fixed on the single point. Finally, in one grand climax, the ajna chakra ignited, the third eye opened, and my being erupted in one vast explosion. It was as if a lightning bolt had struck me on the top of my head, shattering my body into countless infinitesimal pieces, and all that remained was light, endless light, limitless extension, indistinguishable merger into a sea of luminance, instantaneous transmutation into universality, bodiless ecstasy, and boundless extension into light-filled space, expansion and quiet joy beyond measure, a loving merger of all earthly object and cosmic subject, an ineffable merging of none and all, experience and consciousness become whole, infinite and singular, impossible paradox becoming pure being beyond time or form. And thus we entered the embrace of universal beginnings, or as the Kabbalistic Book of Splendor, the Zohar, describes it, the primal center is the innermost light of a translucent subtlety and purity beyond comprehension. That inner point, extended, becomes a palace, which acts as an enclosure for the center, and is of a radiance translucent beyond the power to know it. Then there arose a gentle pulsating amidst the vast sea of light. Some indefinable presence bubbled up from the luminous waters. This great consciousness spoke in silent words of merger and ceaseless nurture, bubbling lovingly up from the bottomless deep. And slowly, softly, a vibratory awareness arose, heralding an oscillation of simultaneous this and that, a separation of one into two things. For a timeless moment, I had the sense of possessing a body bounded by a molecule-thin skin, and at the same time having no outer body whatsoever, only an inner being of living light. Then I felt my cosmic scale being cut into countless horizontal strips, with half of my being swaying left and half right. It was as if I was being rocked in a calming cradle of oscillating light. And from this gentle swaying, I heard the softest, harmonious sound, as of a resonant celestial song. I remained in this ineffable state for timeless hours, as minutes and seconds, until in an instant I began my recoagulation, delimitation, and descent. I left that great sea of light, falling like a comet from the heights. I first flashed down through starry space, then through vistas of unimaginable breadth and variety. Unknown worlds, celestial cities, abstract landscapes flashed before my eye in a whirlwind of shifting sights and sound. Colorscapes as eternal ideas were somehow experienced. These paintings being displayed are from my early Cosmologos series and suggest something of the energetic resonance and diversity of this experience. With each placement of abstract object or shape signifying an eternal force or idea, forming an alphabet of symbolic suggestion that spoke the language of planets and stars, where configurations of abstract form and texture and color communicated ideas and experiences on a universal scale. Clearly, human language fails in the face of such cosmic absolutes. This is why art and poetry may serve as valuable tools in the translation and communication of higher mystical states, suggesting in some small sense the ineffable magnitude of the divine. This final painting is of the Last Judgment by Peter Paul Rubens, and like my previous painting, is suggestive of that vast lower astral sea, wherein countless ideas as forms, in this case human forms, swirl in a great miasma of unresolved aspiration and higher intent. And so I descended from worlds of macrocosmic suggestion to greater comprehensibility in the realm of form. At last I returned to the weight of the earth and the limits of my body. For unknown moments I lay on my back, attempting to rouse myself from the overwhelming force of my experience. For from the time that I had reclined into my corpse pose, I had indeed died to the earthly world. It is such a willful mystical state that Plato aspired to, and referred to as a philosophical death, and the philosopher Pico della Mirandola as the mors osculi, or death by the kiss divine. As I slowly came to temporal consciousness, I began weeping, overwhelmed by the inexpressible magnitude of it all. In a testament to the wondrous symmetry of life become death, become rebirth, I awoke to a vast lightning storm. Such storms were not uncommon in the hot Florida afternoons. But in this instance, as I slowly raised myself to my knees, then edged my way up the nearby door frame, I cried out and asked to some unknown source what had just happened. Indeed, if it had truly happened at all. Astonishingly, my every question was answered with the roar of lightning and thunder, assuring me that it was all truly real, and that this silent lightning voice I now heard was the cosmic orchestrator of it all. Still unsure of and overwhelmed by my experience, I called my good friend George, who, while no mystic, was a practicing Buddhist and more knowledgeable about spiritual matters than me. I told him what had transpired, to which he replied, "There exists a Buddhist visualization used by monks where they imagine their literal decapitation. Of course, this visualization simply provided a metaphor for that separation of body and spirit, which occurs in the mystical state, and refers to that process in Tantric Buddhism and Hinduism, where the Kundalini force sends out the top of the head through the crown chakra Sahasrara, so that the higher mind becomes separated from the rational or discursive intellect of the human brain. Not surprisingly, various mythic or religious analogies can be provided for each stage of my mystical experience. These correspondences only became known to me years after my original encounter. One such case may be found in the Vajra, which is the symbol of the Vajrayana school of Buddhism. Before you are several examples of the Vajra that are used in Buddhist ritual. The Vajra is a weapon originally associated with the Hindu god Indra, which also serves as a ritual object and symbolizes both the indestructible properties of a diamond and the irresistible force of a thunderbolt. The great lightning-like blast that shattered my body and served to release my soul to the vast sea of eternity is echoed in the force of the Vajra. For it is said that the Vajra allows the Buddhist aspirant to achieve an instantaneous mystical enlightenment and a thunderbolt flash of indestructible clarity. A description of mystical transformation, as provided by the Christian saint Teresa of Avila, also strongly echoes my own transformative experience. In her book, The Interior Castle, Teresa describes the soul as like an inner crystalline castle with 7 rooms or mansions. In the 7th mansion comes the mystical marriage, which entails a communion from essence to essence, that is to say, when the human soul essence merges with the universal soul essence. The spirit of Teresa's mystical encounter was captured in the famous sculpture by Bernini, wherein the fiery arrow of divine ecstasy is shown being delivered by a luminous angel. As Teresa described the experience, a blow is felt from elsewhere, in the very deep and intimate part of the soul, where this sudden flash of lightning reduces to dust everything it finds in this earthly nature of ours. Saint Teresa's description of the mystical marriage reflects that fluid merger of the human soul into the vast sea of cosmic light, which I also experienced. As Teresa declared, spiritual marriage is like rain falling from heaven into a river or stream, becoming one and the same liquid, so that the river and rainwater cannot be divided. Or it resembles a streamlet flowing into the ocean, which cannot afterwards be disunited from it. This marriage may also be likened to a room into which a bright light enters through 2 windows. Though divided when it enters, the light becomes one and the same. Teresa further uses the image of a stream of milk, thus suggesting the idea of a universal mother who provides ecstatic nourishment and draws the human soul into her cosmic embrace. It is also interesting to note Hesse's description in Damien of the universal mother Eva as an ocean into which I streamed. The image of the Great Mother has been most important to me in my spiritual journey, as I often came to conceive of my mystical transformations not in terms of patriarchal association, but more so in terms of the receptive maternal principle, particularly as embodied in the wisdom goddesses Athena and Sophia. Yet even here, masks or metaphors have been substituted for transcendent powers in absolute states. And as is common in myth and religion, anthropomorphic reductions are made in order to make the divine immensities comprehensible and approachable to earthbound women and men. Indeed, since I had never been indoctrinated into any preconceived religious structure, my approach and response to these universal principles and powers was never rigidly cast, and thus I was able to establish my own analogies, or provide my own images or descriptions of these universal forces. Such watery and oceanic imagery may also be found in the Hindu scriptures. A Puranic creation myth describes how, after the universe is destroyed by the god Shiva, there remains nothing but a vast milky ocean. It should be noted in this illustration by the woman Mithila painters of India that within this ocean lie many images of the universal sound source, as embodied in the Sanskrit syllable Om or Aum, A-U-M. The presence of these Aum images designate this great ocean as the underlying vibratory source of all creation. Floating on this ocean, resting on the five-headed snake Ananta, is Lord Vishnu, the preserver of material matrix. The Vishnu is described as a male deity, and in actuality Vishnu more often reflects the feminine principles of form and preservation, in the same way that the Holy Spirit of the Christian Trinity, in deeper archetypal truth, embodies the divine feminine principle. It is said that a lotus flower springs from Vishnu's navel, and from this comes Lord Brahma, the creator. Brahma grows lonely and splits himself into two, male and female, thereby reminding us of the parable of Adam and Eve, and thus the polarity principle, which we have often discussed. This split also reminds me of that multitudinous division I felt when elevated and wedded to the ocean of cosmic light. From this cosmic sea and the ruling deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, which is to say the threefold creative matrix, the universe arises. Similarly, after my own physical world was momentarily destroyed by the power of Kundali Shakti, consort of Shiva, so as I return to our primal beginnings, to that great sea of vibratory light which underlies and unifies all. We may find another mystical analogy in Kabbalistic cosmology. Before you is my rendering of the diagrammatic tree of life, which provides a conceptual map of the universe. Each sphere embodies an archetypal principle, which serves to govern the universe. The sphere in the upper left is known as the Sephiroth Binah, also identified as the Great Sea of Understanding. This Sephiroth provides the archetypal receptacle for all the Virgin Mother goddesses found in myth and scripture, be she named Isis, Athena, Sophia, or Mother Mary. This cosmic realm of undifferentiated matter may be equated with the materia prima found in philosophical alchemy, or with the cosmic receptacle as described in Plato's dialogue, the Timaeus. And it is to this great maternal sea that I returned upon mystic merger into the one liquid light that lies ever above, as deepest within. Such conceptual analogies aren't just to be found in myth or religious scripture, but can be found in scientific theory as well. For example, a parallel may be drawn between the cosmic sea of light and that subtle quantum underpinning which underlies and ties together all creation. Or we may look to the Big Bang cosmological model, where in the earliest stages of creation there is said to exist an immeasurable sea of undifferentiated photonic light. Such widespread connections between diverse conceptual models can be explained by the principle of the logos. In many idealist and mystical philosophies, it is thought that all of the world's variations, be they mythic, scientific, religious, aesthetic, or experiential, are projections from a singular universal order, known as the Logos. According to this logoic belief, the whole of the cosmos may be understood as a vast set of variations upon a single theme, be it expressed in the fourfold Pythagorean tetractys, or the Kabbalistic tetragrammaton, or the fivefold grand pentatic matrix sublime. Thus it was a harmonious echo of this underlying universal matrix that I heard when in the embrace of the fluid cosmic fullness. Such a cosmic resonance was identified by the ancients as the harmony of the spheres. We find variants of these archetypal spheres in the wheels of the Hindu chakras, in the Sephiroth of the Kabbalistic tree of life, as well as in the orbs of the Ptolemaic planets and stars. And it is through these subtle forms and powers that I was gifted a brief glimpse into the magnitude of universal creation, revealing worlds and cosmic possibilities beyond the power of simple reason to express. For ineffable and transcendent, at the same time noetic and immanent, is the realm of the cosmic all.